This is The Way We Were, the series that offers a unique glimpse into the past using newly discovered archive footage never seen before on British television. Now, what was it like when you were a child?
I was born in Rhyl in North Wales, and I had such a wonderful start to life. I was so lucky because I was born by the seaside and I had this wonderfully free and easy childhood. If anybody could have had a better beginning, I'd like to challenge them. I had the most perfect rock-like start.
I was brought up in the East End of London in a block of flats. I was on the second floor block of flats, number 26, out in Gould House. And I thought that everybody lived in blocks of flats because I didn't go anywhere. We didn't have a car. I walked to school. And everyone else in my area lived in a council flat. So, you know, some people say, oh, you know, you were poor when you were young, and I was, but so was everybody.
48 men make a dream come true. 48 amateurs, working every moment of their spare time for 4 years, have built this beautiful housing estate near Brentwood for their families. And now the houses are ready to live in. Says Dennis, our only hope of getting homes of our own was to build them ourselves. The results of our labours have been beyond our wildest dreams. And the cost? $18.50 per house, little more than half their market value.
Home is always sweeter when you can afford a house.
Our house was a 1930s house, and we were an end terrace, which my mum thought was quite posh, because we had a bit more space than everybody else. We had like 3 gardens instead of 2, because we had the side bit. And it was just very open.
Well, I was brought up in the first garden city that this country's had, Letchworth Garden City. So there was a lot of space. The idea was that everyone had a large garden, which we did, fortunately. We had a detached house, 4 bedrooms, very pleasant. And my sense of my upbringing was pleasant, comfortable, middle-class life.
An early executive home, but you couldn't beat a traditional farmhouse.
I was in a village in Shropshire. There was a bus twice a day into the big town. The big town was Wolverhampton, and that was exotic land. That was like show business, Las Vegas. You went to Wolverhampton once a month if you were lucky. The farm was, 350 acres. We milked 150 cows twice a day. My grandfather, who was an old-fashioned man, a 1930s figure, believed that women should look after animals and men should look after the land. So that's how it was.
I was born in the front room. My dad was having pie and mash lunch. He'd come home for lunch, and there was a hatch between the kitchen and the front room, and he could hear wah, wah, and he opened the hatch and, all right, doll, and my mum went, got another girl? We went, all right, and went back to work, you know. That was the 4th born, so it wasn't a big deal.
Every mother thinks that their baby is the best and most beautiful looking in the world. And my mother always used to say that I was a fabulous looking baby. I actually saw a shot of myself. I was actually hideous. I made a monkey look attractive. You know, I was really hideous as a child. A lot of people would say I still am, but I really was quite an ugly baby.
But even ugly babies had their own transport.
I remember prams in the old Victorian concept of them with the little hood that came up. And I remember my mother being particularly proud of her pram that my sister was in. She was younger than me, so I remember that. I'd probably been in that pram. And it was a monstrosity, absolute monstrosity. And the idea that she took it into shops is wholly offensive. And then you'd look in and there'd be these babies swaddled in so much gear. How they didn't all overheat and die of heat exhaustion, I don't know.
I was lucky. I had a Silver Cross pram, and they were the Ferraris of the pram world. And my mum would dress me all in white and bounce me up the road in it, like that.
People would come round, my little sister, and they'd have knitted homemade baby clothes, you know, and they were terrible pinks and really badly knitted and far too big. All the sleeves would be short and the legs would be long. And so she was forced to wear them because her mother felt that she was obliged to put them on her. She looked ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Thank goodness for modern baby clothing.
But there's nothing wrong with shorts and sandals and sherbet and ginger beer. And practical jokes.
I'd never been allowed to the cinema, and the silent films were on then. I longed to go to the cinema. Well, I had this dental box with the money in to save money for the Royal Dental Hospital where I was having my teeth done. I had no means of getting to the cinema, which cost threepence. So when nobody was looking, I took this box out of the drawer, bottom drawer, split it open. There was 5p in. I went to the cinema. I sat there in terror, and they had a policeman at the back because it was a children's show, you see. I thought I'm going to be arrested any minute, you see. And then I'd go home. My mother comes in, stands by my side. This is broken open money box for the Royal Dental Hospital. And my mother said, now, you know what happens to children who steal? They have to go to reformatories. And I thought, oh, crumbs, I'll be going off to a reformatory tomorrow. I'll lose all the family and everything.
Bring that back or I'll box your ears.
I remember having an air rifle for my 14th birthday, and at that time lots of kids had air rifles. We'd buy mint imperials and go out to the woods. Now a mint imperial, it glows white in the woods, and we'd see who could shoot it from the furthest away. So you'd walk 40 yards, turn over, you'd shoot, you'd scatter a whole load on the ground, you'd shoot them, and then you'd walk another 10 yards and shoot another one. And then you think you were the real sure shot. One particular afternoon, I got my air rifle out, and thinking that I was, a real sure shot, a neighbour over the back of the house was up on a ladder painting his top of his roof like this. And I thought, well, I'm going to shoot the brush out of his hand, which I did, actually, with the first shot. And he disappeared out of sight, and I thought, oh my God, what's happened here? And the next thing, it was like Conan the Barbarian, a whirling dervish just came straight through our house, this irate Australian fellow with a bleeding hand. And my father had to restrain him from killing me.
Yes, if you did wrong in those days, the penalty was death.
One of the worst bits of my life, and why I never tell a lie now, because I white lied. I told a fib that I said to my mother, you needed 6p for lunch to stop making me sandwiches to take in. But actually there wasn't a lunch, and I half starved because I was putting these 6p to make myself go to heaven up this ladder. And by the end of the term, I was really almost ill with being, not having anything to eat all day. And I couldn't get rid of the 6p. And I had to tell my mother the lie in the end.
Yes, owning up was part of growing up. Now get up them stairs, son, and tidy your room. Then as now, Granny and Grandad were always full of advice on how to tame a wild child. Bribery usually did the trick.
My granny, I only remember one of my grandparents, but Granny was a very important part of our lives, and she lived quite close by. In fact, she lived next door but one. So we were always nipping round to Gran's house to go and, raid the fruit trees, or I remember dipping for newts in her pond and finding little creatures, frogs and newts. So Granny was someone that we revered in a way, and was important and we respected, and sometimes we were quite mischievous with her as well, I suppose.
My grandparents did all the babysitting. My dad was away at sea and my mum worked, so I spent lots of time with my grandparents. They would come over or I would go over to them. My gran used to try and dress me up in pretty frocks. As you can imagine, I'm not really a pretty frock person, so I did escape down the garden with my granddad and help him with the hoeing. I'm sure that went down well as well.
My grandmother was an amazing woman, and she was remarkable. My grandmother was an Edwardian person living in the 1950s. In the war, she'd been responsible for organisation if the Hun arrived. And I remember when I was a kid finding in the attic a whole array of envelopes marked to be opened in case of invasion, and rushing downstairs and saying to a queen, I used to call her Queen, Queen, can we open these and see what you were supposed to do if the Hun arrived? And she scowled at me and she said, no, those were given to me in trust. We must burn them. This is in 1958, when state secrets of that kind wouldn't be valuable.
Rediscover upstairs. Stanner, the stairlift people.
So who we got? We have got Dulcie Ball.
Two best mates.
One to Holly Willoughby. I'm not sure.
I'm gay.
On a mission
Tell me you're joking.
to help Britain fall in love.
Tonight, the prize is love.
Holly and Fern go dating tonight at 10 on ITV1.
You know, I think it's about time we applauded all that's brilliant about Britain. So why not join me and a few choice celebrities for an afternoon chat every day, and we can talk about anything you want. I'll have music, experts giving advice on all sorts of stuff, and if you've an opinion on anything, I want to hear it. Oh, and I'm not completely hanging up my trowel. I'll talk about gardening too, if you like.
The Alan Titchmarsh Show, weekdays at 3 on ITV1.
The Space Shuttle Pursuit launched from Arlington Space Centre this morning.
Get straight to the point with digital text on ITV. For the latest information fast, just press text.
Rediscover upstairs. Stanner, the stairlift people. Pay attention, everyone. We're back in the days when school formed your character or broke your spirit. For some, they really were the best days of their lives.
I really enjoyed going to school. I enjoyed the social atmosphere of the school. I enjoyed the teachers. I enjoyed the learning. I enjoyed the football, the freedom that we had, the misbehaviour, which was rampant but not nasty. And I loved the fact we were overcrowded and forced to, hang out in porta bins. It was an adventure every day.
Infant school and primary school I absolutely loved. I can remember my teachers, I can remember the kids. I can remember just longing to get to school.
Morning bell. Fill up with learning, liver and potato and spotted dick, and then burn it all off in PE.
My first day of school, I thought, this is a breeze. I went to school that morning with my mum and went into Miss Brunt, who was my teacher, and break time, I thought, well, that wasn't too bad, and I went home. I got home at about 11 and my mum said, what are you doing here? I went, well, I've been to school, Mum, it was great. She went, no. So she took me back and it was then I realised you had to stay till 4 o'clock.
We had desks, of course, with wooden lids, and Mrs. Dyer, and maybe 24, 25 pupils, village school, with high ceilings that was never warm in the winter and always too hot in the summer. And Mrs. Dyer, who I don't remember hitting anybody, but was terrifying. You didn't mess. And if Mrs. Dyer said that Knitty Nora was coming round, the lady who checked you for knits, then, you stood up and paid attention.
And boarding schools were still very much in the dark ages.
I don't know whether there probably were some good boarding prep schools, but this was a horror place. It really was. Something you read about in a chapter by Charles Dickens. It was just rather vicious and authoritarian. I say sometimes I think the masters were men who had been damaged in some way in the First World War and were eking out their frustration on the little boys in their charge.
We did Latin for 3 years, which didn't really equip you for the mid-60s and the pop revolution and the white-hot technology. And all the masters wore mortarboards and gowns and an air of slightly seedy decay.
The first few weeks were fine, but then you start realising that it's a lot tougher than you thought, and you've got to stand on your own 2 feet. There are regulations about how you behave, what you do, the time you go to bed, the time you get up. It's very much institutional living.
Then the modern comprehensive school put the emphasis on the practical rather than theory.
I went to a mixed secondary school, and it was very much that the girls do the cooking, and we also did needlework. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the needlework or the ironing. To this day, I still can't bear it.
There was a choice at my school between, I think it was Latin and domestic science. My sister, well, one of them anyway, definitely took domestic science and is a wonderful cook. I took Latin. I can't cook, and I can't even read any Latin anymore either, but never mind, that was my choice.
There was one teacher you didn't want to cross. All-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing.
I do remember my headmaster, Mr. Webb. He was great fun, but I used to hate it when he'd suddenly appear in a lesson and our teacher would have that lesson off and he'd go, right, we'll do a spelling test. And he'd go, spello willow. And then I'd think, no, he's now going to tell us to spell Salisbury, which was difficult for me, I have to say.
Most of my teachers were nuns. Some of them were extraordinarily eccentric. One in particular, Sister Christopher, I remember, was always either letting off what smelt like smoke bombs in the chemistry lab or feeding her stick insects with worms or something, I don't know, in the biology lab. And she was just crazy.
Every teacher had a name and a nickname.
There was Skinny Collins, there was Jonesy the gym master, and there was Mr. Ward, the headmaster. And I tell you now, there was none of this school bullying, because they would have nipped it right in the bud.
Of course, we all got walloped like mad at school. You see, that was awful. You always sat with your hands on your head all the time, sat like that for hours on them, which was terribly bad for us. Public caning was terrible. If you were naughty, they rapped you on the knuckles like that. But if you were really bad, you were caned. So you had to go out, you had to put your hand out, and you got a whacking great wallop with a ruler. Oh my God, it stank for about a week.
The teachers were very strict, yes. I mean, if you did something wrong, they'd chuck chalk at you and things like that. Something they wouldn't be allowed to do now. But, it didn't do us any harm. If you were naughty, you got told off, as simple as that.
Sometimes it was all worth it, just to see the look on your teacher's face.
Maths block, 2nd floor. Teacher, Mr. B. Let's call him Mr. B. Sat at the front of the class. Silence, quite strict. Knock at the door. Another teacher. Mr. B gets up and goes out. Windows are open, hot sunny. One of the lads, whose dad's in the Marines, climbs out of the window and hangs by his fingernails to the window ledge outside. No one says anything. Mr. B comes back down, sits at his desk, looks around the class and thinks, we're one pupil short here. I was by the door, no one left. Where can he be? Stands up, says, where's so-and-so? Don't know, sir. Don't know, sir. Of course, little girl at the back, SWAT, says, he's outside, sir. So Mr. B's mind goes, outside, but we're on the 2nd floor. He can't be out. Oh, my God. And he goes over to the window and looks out the window, and hanging like this from the 2nd floor is this child, who was immediately grabbed by the scruff of the neck and dragged back in.
One day we pushed a trampoline into the centre of the hall, and a boy called Harper decided to get maximum bounce off of the trampoline that he would leap off of the trampoline. And he believed he'd then bounce up and down. But when he landed, he flew off at the equal opposite direction towards the stage. And he landed on top of the lectern and wrecked it.
I remember once we had long hair, me and my friend Ian, and we backcombed it, and it used to stand up like this. And we got chalk from the blackboard, and we put chalk all over our face, and we walked past the secretary's window, and she's typing away, and we walked past like this, going, like this. She just thought we're pathetic, you know, but anything like that, anything you could do.
I was the awful boring academic. I worked ever so hard at school. It was very difficult for me to be naughty. In fact, so difficult that once I deliberately tried to get a conduct mark at my school, and I went across and I swung on all the gym bags after school and broke them all. And I thought this was a great triumph and I would be punished. But when the Sister Angela, the headmistress, asked the next morning, who had done this dreadful thing, I didn't own up. I just sat there feeling gleeful. But so no one ever knew I was naughty. So that was my image, I suppose, the goody-goody.
But no matter how good you were, there was one person everyone had to see, matron. And every illness seemed to get treated with the same bottle of medicine.
And we had this ghastly matron who had I think that she got the job because she hated little boys. She had an obsession about them and made us take awful medicines every morning. We were lined up and you had to take medicines to make sure our bowel movements were working properly.
Once a year, we had a school medical. But once a month, we had a knit lady and a verruca lady. Now, I don't remember anyone getting knits, but I tell you what, we all had verrucas. You picked them up at the swimming baths. I had a load, and I remember my mum having to take me to the clinic, and they burnt them out.
Ouch! But that was nothing compared to having your teeth pulled.
The dentist came around twice a term, by my memory, and was probably a very, very fine public servant. She had a treadle that she used to use, rather like an old sewing machine, to power the drill that went into your mouth. And I can remember now feeling terrified because they used the small room as the temporary dentist waiting room. And you'd hear the screams of the kids, but nobody moved, because if they did, Mrs. Dyer would have a word.